could be a composition in and of itself, right?
These are the most comprehensive
Yeah.
effect samples ever done. We went really, really deep. I think in total it was like 66,000 different effects when you combine the woodwinds and the brass and the strings.
Very cool. That's just the sauce. It's just it. It's the thing. It's absolutely that sound. And the mod wheel is going to the master pitch to kind of give a speeding up the tape vibe to this patch. Pretty brutal, but very effective. This is Aleatoric Woodwinds, and I suppose we should talk a little bit about what that word means. The way I would describe it is organized chaos or organized improvisation. There's a general goal in terms of what the type of sound is going to be. Maybe there's some kind of sheet music written down, but it's very broad and it's very interpretational. And then each individual musician takes that direction and puts their own spin on it. From a practical standpoint, that's going to yield a lot of very unique, clustery effects that can be used in trailers, scores, all kinds of maybe modern classical music. And it is far and away one of the most unique libraries I've ever had the chance to work with. We'll get to hear a little bit from my conversation with Troels about the specifics behind the creation of this library. Now, some of our viewers may be aware of this library already. It comes from the Cage Woodwinds contact instrument. But I am so thrilled to have it in Soundpaint. You can really get into the meat of all of these phrases, put them through effects, try stuff with time stretch to get even crazier effects. And it is so fast and easy to work with. I mean, by reading these titles, there's very little left to the imagination in terms of what the general sound of these parts are going to be. And those parts, yes, well, we do get quite a few of them. I believe around 84, 85, something like that. That was just my quick count right before starting filming. And you get 3 mic positions as well, the close, deca, and wide. So if I'm doing math well, that's approximately 27, 28 different headings, different types of phrases in this aleatoric style. So let's jump into these parts and check out what this actually sounds like. As I said, there's not much left to the imagination. Everything is grouped by just high and low. And I found that these titles are appropriately descriptive, just enough so that you know what direction you're heading in, but not too much that you feel like it's prescribed or something that's very stale. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference between the 3 options of mic position choices that you have. I'm going to choose this very first part called high, ascending, cluster high, close, deca, and wide, and I want to maybe pick a key and just see if you can hear the difference between the mic positions. So for me, it's like you're getting a little bit more distance with each position. Close is obviously fairly dry, though you still get a little bit of the hall sound. It's very nice, very tasteful. Deca is kind of somewhere in between close and wide. That's my personal favorite. I think that's just the sweet spot for me and just absolutely captures both the instrument and the hall in a good proportion. And then you have your wide, which of course is going to capture the most ambience. But anyway, breaking down a sound like this, I am sure, I haven't seen the sheet music or the direction or the notes, but I could see it being a 1-beat ascending gesture. Maybe a note range was given roughly, but each musician kind of chose their own note and kind of gave their own spin on it. And so the timing is roughly the same. So it's great. It's rhythmically strong. It's got such a nice dynamic punctuation. Each key is so different from the last. I mean, we talk a lot about round robins and stuff like that. The round robins are really, honestly, for me, key to key, because you're given kind of a general heading, a general description, and then the way that every take is going to be slightly different. The musician is going to choose a slightly different note. It's just so different from note to note. It's very, very cool. Obviously, being that there are 85 of these, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I am going to choose a couple of my favorites. I really, really like the sound of this one called Borealis. That could be a composition in and of itself, right? So when you see stuff like this, arc, trill, that's kind of talking about the general phrasing style of the part. Arc is going to have a little bit of a swell. And then we go down to Borealis trill arc, which is going to be a swell, but trilling this time. And then there's Borealis trill sustain, which will probably have no swell. Swell and note, of course, but not the same dynamic swell that we had before. That's the cool thing about this library, is sometimes musicians will just decide to go on their own and really kind of go for it. You have some directional stuff, descending cluster. Very, very unique, very cool. Again, note to note, so different. Just some straight ahead clusters. This one's called Johnny's favorite cluster. That's beautiful. That's so cool. And I know that there are some of you who have workflows that are very, very prescribed, and maybe you want to have like your own individual note by note cluster and then put it through your own reverb. But there's something magical about capturing the spirit of all of these musicians in this hall, in this moment, responding to this direction that I think is just unmatched. This library does head into the tonal direction a little bit with some downers. Even then, there's still some variance that's really, really nice. And of course, some uppers as well. Whoo! It's such a nice tail. I love, I'm obsessed with the way that this was recorded. It's just this little like plume of, wow. Magic to me. And then I'm going to rapid fire through a couple of these. You've got some shrieks. The Calling. Toy Train Graveyard. Be sure to hold down that key for as long as you can, because stuff happens. I mean, this is what I would describe as dying train whistles with some life and some spirit in them. Wave of Chaos. Let's try the wide miking for this. I can see the characters. I can feel the characters scurrying, running around. You see why I say this is organized chaos. And then moving on to the second half, you have low versions. Now, there are low versions of similar approaches above, like we have some Borealis sustains here. Then you have some unique stuff to just the low parts as well, like this, which is called fe, which I think is actually the sound of it. Fe. Very cool. And some staccato parts as well, which is always useful. Anyway, that's the general vibe and gist of what you can expect in Aleatoric Woodwinds. If you're going for that just absolute, like, visceral effect, unsteady kind of, unsettling sound, this is really the way to go. And now I'd like to throw it over to Troels, who I had a wonderful conversation with about this library, its inception, what he was going for, how it was created, and what he thinks makes it so special. And we started talking just a little bit more general about music and what music means to both of us and how individualism is such an important aspect to libraries like this.
Dealing with Aleatoric was very new to us. Like, we'd recorded effects with the orchestra before, but we always used to notate it.
Yeah.
And this time around, we hired the whole symphony orchestra, and then I got the horrible idea of just wanting to, like, play sounds to the orchestra. So I had a synthesizer and I would just make sounds, and then I was like, guys, play it.
Yeah.
And they couldn't. So the whole thing had to be redone.
Right.
Because that session just did not work very well. They were trying, but they need to have everything written down. And it's ironic because the notion of Aleatoric is randomness.
Right.
Why do you need randomness written down?
Yeah. Very true. So for example, like a cluster like that.
Yeah. So that's the Aleatoric freedom. It is written down
as
a sort of crescendo run phrase.
Sure.
But they just know you have to go up, but you don't have to think about specific note. You just do your blip.
And the timing.
That's conducted.
Conducted.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a conductor that has all the notation, and then you try to time it, but it's within. There's a freedom of tonality, if you will. It becomes eight. That's why the whole thing is atonal for that reason.
Yeah, for sure.
The holophonic is one of my favorites because it's kind of like it has a tonality to it. I found like that one to be more. So they're playing in a unique way in the winds, like that generates those overtones.
Yeah.
It's such an Eerie Morricone sound, that one.
Oh yeah, for sure. From an effects. I mean, if I were to hear that, I wouldn't necessarily immediately think woodwind.
No.
It's like a metallic, almost like a metallic timbre to it, like a bowed saw kind of cymbal sound.
Imagine like we did like a metallic ensemble in an orchestral hall where everyone just got metallic thing and we could like strike them.
Yeah.
That could be cool to do a metallic ensemble. That's never been done.
If you want to see it, say it in the comments.
No, for reals, man. That could be interesting. Maybe we should. We recorded this one in Budapest.
Aha. Okay.
And they had great players there. We worked with them many times over. I guess the great thing about Aleatoric is that they didn't need to have a like excellent musicianship, but they did. Like these are really great musicians.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting working with the classical musicians because every time it's Aleatoric or you try to go into the world of improvisation, they get uncomfortable.
Of course, yeah. No, I mean that's.
Why is that? I mean, you're classically trained.
Yeah, well, from the start I was classically trained, but then I moved more into jazz, and I think that there's just a certain prescribed manner to the way that people are taught. I have this conversation with a lot of my orchestral musician friends. Is when you're playing Beethoven's Ninth for the 100th time with your orchestra, what level of individualism can you put on it? And so I think in a certain way a library like this would actually, at least in my opinion, would be a kind of opening of the gates and removing the shackles a little bit. And this is for jazz too, playing in big bands. I remember very much being in rehearsals and having my instructors say, like, you should really know what the alto saxophone part is, you should know what the trombone part is, you should be listening so that contextually where what you're playing fits in. So I think with this kind of improvised music, I can see how that would be a challenge for some orchestras, just because I mean you literally walked in and you just said give me this, and I think jazz musicians, part of the reason I was attracted to the genre and part of the reason that it resonates with me is because there is that freedom of being able to express yourself, and some of my greatest joys are kind of stumbling into things. And I feel like that's just it's a bit like asking someone who maybe reads off of a teleprompter all the time to give a free speech, and kind of just do a public speaking engagement off the riff. It's like it's not their zone, it's not their comfort zone, and so I can see definitely how that would create some trouble. Yeah.
Or treble.
Or treble. No treble, all bass. Yeah. One thing I really like to do is kind of have let me see if I can find a program example of this. Mic positions, yeah. So, and I don't know, this is just kind of an approach I took to both the string library and this one as well, is kind of fading between close and wide positions. I found that was something that was really kind of unique, almost as if the players were leaning into the microphone. So I would automate a little bit of the volume down on the wider ones and a little bit up on the close mic so that you can get...
Oh, that's going between the mics?
So you're getting a little bit more of the wide timbre, and then you're kind of fading into the closer one, almost as if they were leaning into the mic. And I just thought that, these, I mean, it's so great. The Decca, I think, is probably my favorite. That's like the most well-rounded, beautiful in between. Such an awesome sound. What do you... Were you just trying to like write what it sounds like?
I have no idea what it's called.
It's Feehh.
Oh, it's a sound Colin and I have. It goes like so that was a good example of where with the orchestra, I try in the beginning, hey, just make this like kind of sound, but this is the end result of that.
Yeah, and then my other favorite approach to this was kind of just picking and choosing different sounds on different keys because they're so different from note to note. How many, just estimate, like how many phrases exist between, like the full range of a part? Like for example, I'm on the shriek kit.
So it's individual for certain parts will have unique effects on every single key.
Yeah.
Others won't have as many if they're like longer and stuff.
Sure.
Like it's really individual per part. But as you know, with everything in Soundpaint, there's stuff happening on all the keys. But for me, like working with Aleatoric is almost like it's not an intellectual exercise as much as just using your ear freely. Okay, that sounds cool. That could work here. But as it's random when we created it, should also be used a little randomly in music, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I can play an atonal cluster and really enjoy it now.
Oh, yeah.
Where I used to be like, oh, that's like, but as my ear has evolved or devolved or whatever, I find beauty in that sometimes.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Those two notes, the one you just played in that one, if you play those two together, that could be a beautiful...
certain rhythm to the attack of it that kind of lends itself to... Yeah, definitely, absolutely, for sure.
Try to do my favorite, try to open rack time and slow that trill like down to like near infinity. I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
That for me, like, it's almost like animals or something, some...
Oh, for sure. Growling, yeah. If you put a ladder filter on that, almost sounds like underwater.
Yeah, yep. It's like it's talking, right?
Yeah, like a subaquatic kind of life under the surface vibe, yeah.
I have it, like, you're more musically gifted than I am.
No, stop it.
For me, like, I feel sometimes like I almost hear instruments talk, like actual language.
I've always been an advocate when I talk to students and people that I teach and talk about the bass and just instruments in general. They're solely extensions of our voices, right? Like I wish I could sing the sound of my bass, and it's like it's very much a part of me, and I feel that same connection with synthesizers and programming. What we're essentially doing in Soundpaint, especially when we're doing these kind of hybrid instruments and we get into effects, is you're creating something from scratch. You're creating an individual timbre that will never exist outside of your session in Soundpaint. And so I think, a lot of my composition and a lot of my sound design comes from me trying to vocalize something from a sound perspective, especially filter motion. Like, and that's how I teach synthesis as well, is I think about kind of the oscillators as like the vocal cords, and the filter is like the lips, and resonance is the jaw placement.
Oh, okay.
Cool? Yeah, because it's, that kind of thing. And that goes for any resonant body of any instrument. You can literally hear, that's alive. There's so many different characters in there as well. There's a growling character, there's a bird, there's, I can definitely make all of that out in that sound.
Mm. I think that's one thing for me in this aleatoric thing. Like, it's full of ambiences. Like, you take this shit and you tune it down, you have immediately something.
I hear like a falling shipwreck, you know?
Yeah. Very deep, heavy metal stuff. Yeah.
The creaking.
Oh, that's like Titanic, like turning around or something. Totally.
Oh yeah.
But that one was also speaking like it's like it has a voice.
Yeah. I love that if you just adjust the time module by just a little bit, it becomes something completely different. It's a little bit more active, a little bit more. Yeah.
The original Cage library was in Contact and had the limitations that has.
Yeah.
But now, like, even though it's almost a decade later, but unleashing it inside of Soundpaint is like, oh my god, like I feel more free now. I can really mangle this material however I want.
Of course.
It's delightful. Even learning to deal with the stuff that is ugly to the ear as well, like the things that makes us uncomfortable.
Sure.
I think this library in particular of Cage, because this is in certain ways the most beautiful when it's like soft, but also the most eerie and displeasing when it's not. So you're going low now.
I mean, there's nothing more.
I love
eerie
those.
than those. I mean, that is unsettling to a T.
And you know, you're so right around the rhythm. 1, 2, 1,
right.
1. Like it's very precise that way.
Well, it makes sense that it was conducted. I was thinking like it was just kind of a free for all, but the conducting. Totally
you can
makes
feel
sense.
it. That rhythm you just talked about earlier. That's it.
Yeah. It's right there. It's right there. Something that you kind of introduced me to very early on is you like to think about the highs, lows, like you like to frequency separate things and group them. And we see that so many times in Soundpaint libraries. It's always like high, mid, low, or whatever. Talk a little bit about that. Is when you're creating music, do you find value in just kind of not really thinking about, okay, these are my bass clarinets and my low stuff, and this is like my high flutes? Like, do you derive value from just thinking more in terms of bulks and using highs and lows in that way?
It started with percussion for me.
Sure.
Like, just like, okay, you like bass drum, and then you go, like, you work up to the toms, the snares, the hats, and like, so I see, and when we recorded these guys here, it was the same premise. It's like, okay, this is atonal.
Yeah.
There are instruments that are deep, there are instruments that are high. So for that reason, the library is equally divided in high and lows. But it more comes from that sort of looking at music as like just raw frequencies. Like, where do you belong? Where do you belong?
That's what I kind of wanted to tap into, because you could totally look at it from the orchestrator cap, which is like, okay, your flutes and your clarinets should blend in a certain way and in different frequencies. But I think there's something super advantageous just to saying like, okay, I need a high thing here, and you can deal with the EQ later if there's something that's clashing or whatever. But getting you in the ballpark of what you're hearing that fast is invaluable to me, at least.
Yeah, and this is first and foremost also a scoring tool, so it's designed to get you there fast. Oh, I need that. And like, generally speaking, like, there's that low thing or is that high thing. So so that's the division. When you're playing these things, there's also like a little bit of a perversion with this library. Yeah, for sure. In the sense, like, we have these elegant instruments. Like, we have another video where it's talking about legato flutes and how the flute has evolved over 50,000 years, and particularly the last 250 years as we introduce new metals and mechanical valves, and how beautiful and perfect it's become. Yeah. And then here we go. It's like, no, play it wrong. Play it atonal, uncomfortably. We're treading backwards, or we're going somewhere else.
Sure. I mean, that to me, that is that kind of summarizes like a general approach that's taken to almost all Soundpaint instruments. Is it's something you're familiar with a twist. Right. It's got a little bit of a what on steroids. What blown into something that's going to create something completely different. And as you said, I think this library is a great example of that, because just inherently the phrases are chaotic. The phrases are literally make people who are classically trained say, I can't do that.
Yeah. Which is Soundpaint, like, these are truly like sound colors designed to just inspire or scare or whatever they do. Yeah.
How many days did this take you to do?
Oh man, I don't remember how many days this took to do. I remember the whole project took, I think it was like 2.5 weeks of consecutive recordings.
Wow. So with this much randomness and this much, or should I say orchestrated randomness, when do you know that you're done? When did you say, okay, I think we're and call it? Like how because you could really do this forever, and you would get something completely new every day, and it would be different and unique. At what point did you feel like, okay, this is a complete set of work, and I think we're good?
I mean, there's a level of physical exhaustion and mental exhaustion too. You kind of feel, okay, it's feeling kind of sameish now. We've been there before.
Sure.
And that's really like how we've done it always. It's kind of like once we start feeling we've reached like a point of heavy exhaustion. I mean, put that together with a heavy amount of OCD, like we're far down the lines. I mean, we released a Game Boy today with 70,000 samples. Yeah, I mean, it has 2 square waves, a noise generator, and a wavetable.
Yeah.
How can one possibly justify that?
70,000, right? Yeah. But I mean, that to me, that is where the life is. You know, it's in the differences. We were talking about it earlier, like the dirt, right? You know, and it's what that dirt sounds like and how it's perceived. You know, I think in the world of scoring, the same types of sounds are just being used over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yep.
And, you know, I think it's almost become its own language, you know, in the same way that I think our ears are trained, you know, to Western harmony and to recognize chord progressions, similar chord progressions.
Yeah.
I think that the same goes for scoring, to associate certain sounds with certain emotions.
Yeah.
It's almost like the same things have been used time and time again, to the point where now, you know, I can play, you know, the major upper to someone. It can give me some kind of imagery that's probably not far off from what I would use in a scoring setting. And so I think the inherent value of a library like this is it shakes it up a little bit. And you are playing off of things that people are familiar with in a setting, an instrument aspect, in a directional aspect, in an effect standpoint, but there is that random aspect that really makes it something unique and kind of will, I feel like, unsettle or make the listener think twice.
Yeah, you're right. I think, like, you know, it's weird to make a library that's like deliberately made you to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Maybe, and that's a horrible way of selling this library, but that is, or explore atonalities or you know, dissonance.
Yeah.
It's like, I think we recorded in 2014. Like all these years later, like 9 years later, it's still like like the soul is still there. I wouldn't have done it very differently.
When I was programming for this, I was letting the sound speak to me. You know, I would pull up, basically, my method was just pulling up all 3 mic positions and hearing what it sounds like, just basically. And the first thing that came to my mind every time I would hear it is kind of the direction I would go in. I think there's something very cool about letting the phrases and the instruments speak to you.
Yeah.
And that, to me, was the most inspirational way to approach this library.
Yeah.
Was just letting it talk. Well, as I'm getting into this with the viewers, is there anything that you want to make sure gets covered or mentioned in terms of just the importance of this, the process, anything that's just like kind of open floor, anything that you really want to make sure that people know as they're considering adding this to their Soundpaint family?
The only thing I'll say is that, you know, all the parts are there in their sort of naked exposition.
Yeah.
And for people that just want the articulations with no nonsense, just go for the parts.
Sure.
And then there's all the programs you've done that are exploring the parts.
Right.
I say that because it's a departure from Kontakt. In Kontakt, we only had one sort of way of doing it, which would equal the parts in Soundpaint. But in Soundpaint, we have this sort of extra dimension with the programs, which are like interpretations of the material. So, so there's like kind of 2 libraries in one for everything we do.
Absolutely. And there's so many advantages. I mean, just being able to parse each part apart and stack and just do it so quickly. I mean, huge advantage over, I feel like, the Kontakt version, in the sense that you can really dig into the meat of the source material.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's super fun to play with, and thanks for sharing your thoughts on it.
Oh, my pleasure.
So now that you've gotten the full picture on Aleatoric Woodwinds, let's head over to the program section and see how we can use some of this stuff in action. I had the great pleasure of creating these programs for this library and really tried to take it in as many different directions as possible. We have stuff like this first one called Alarm Sequence, which utilizes 3 parts. I think some offset, definitely on the first part, and some very interesting effects, and of course, an ARP. So, as I said in my conversation with Troels, I really tried to let these parts speak to me when I was programming for them, and I felt like there was just something very cool about cutting off the attack and just jumping straight to the kind of unsettled cluster that was created from these parts, and just really kind of slicing them almost in a robotic way. But still very, very unsettling and very, very unique. Here's an example of kind of a combo rip. I chose one-note sames in 4 different parts, all from the same heading but different mic positions. I tried to favor the really high, shrieky stuff to the wide mics, some of the more mid-range stuff to the Decca, and then the low stuff to the close mics. It was no more scientific than just going through and finding the notes that I thought were my favorite and would complement each other, and then creating a combo accent from one-note saming them. And it sounds like this. Awesome. I did do a little... Oh, nice. Okay, so I assigned the mod wheel to pitch in case you wanted a slight pitch variation. But it's great as is, and I want to just break down what each part is and kind of stack it so you can hear what each layer is doing. So this is the first part that I found. Second. Third. Fourth. And then once I picked mic positions, it was just kind of a game of mixing them together, panning, and it's totally effective. Oh man, I love this part called Death Arc. It's so beautiful and elegant. It's just it's perfect. I mean, instantly you already have a preconceived notion about what kind of moment in a film or in a musical composition you would want to use that. Which I think is the goal of a lot of these effects. I gave you a little bit of speed control to the mod wheel, so if that's too fast for you, you can just raise your mod wheel and make it a little bit slower. So anytime you see time stretch mod, that's my shorthand of time stretch to the mod wheel. Oh yeah, let's get low. We got one part here, tuned down 28 cents and some dark processing. So this is gonna be a nice drone. So each layer adding just a little bit more complexity to that beefy kind of crunchy low end. I love it. This one's called Eerie and Harsh, and I consider this to kind of be my like main treatment of the Borealis arc. This is one of my favorites in the library. I felt like with a little bit of filtering and some nice EQ and a reverb, it's got this eerie and harsh sound to it. And then you open up that filter and just kind of let all the upper harmonics come out. What a work of art. I mean, that is just, it's infinitely useful and just gorgeous, and I got there so fast. This is a single part through relatively simple treatment, and it's just got this unique vibe to it that I just love. Here's kind of a similar approach that I took to that last one, but using clusters and kind of a cluster crescendo vibe. The mod wheel is now mapped to the volume of part 2 and 3, And yeah, ooh, I forgot I did that. That's fun. I love putting LFOs on EQ bands and then either having them just kind of work within the EQ or having them triggered by the mod wheel. I gave you one note stretch on this so that you can really find something that works within your score, but I love just that disturbance in the lower frequency range. I mean, that's so... very, very cool. And then because I'm me, I had to try and create a synth out of this because I just can't seem to help myself. I used the time rack to freeze 2 instances of Toy Train Graveyard and just get a really, really consistent straight tone. And then I put some ladder filter, compression, plate reverb, and a little bit of vibrato via the mod wheel, and it created this really fluty, beautiful synth. Really pretty, right? And just for the sake of, so you know what this sounds like, I'm going to pull the treatment off so you can just hear the core tone here. That is Frozen, 1 part. One note stretch. And then I added a second part that is tuned slightly sharp to give kind of that chimey sort of like, you know, detune synth effect that we all know and love. And then some ladder filter, a little bit of LFO. It's really pretty. Really, really pretty. Similarly, I use the time rack and offset to get some FM bell sounds. So very, very metallic, very harsh. And I put some chorus on the mod wheel because what good is FM bell sounds if you can't run it through a chorus, right? Lots of fun. Let's go back into the spooky underbelly, underworld vibe that this library just totally nails and try Harmonic Cluster. That's just the sauce. It's just it. It's the thing. It's absolutely that sound. Here's a fun one. This one's called LF-OMG. So I used 4 different LFOs here to kind of goose each one of these chaos parts. Just trying to add even more motion to an already pretty motion-focused part. And the mod wheel is going to the master pitch to kind of give a speeding up the tape vibe to this patch. Pretty brutal, but very effective. Had to do something a little tonal here, so I did a major 7 Flurry, which is exactly that. Did I put anything on the mod wheel? Oh, I did. Even more pitch mix and shimmer as you raise the mod wheel. I like it. Very, very cool. This is just a simple little trick here called Mod Reveals Rip. I kind of did a fast decay to a 0 sustain point, which is useful, but if you want to have a longer rip, you just raise the mod wheel and the decay goes up, so it reveals more of the sound. Pretty useful. This one's a little wild. It's called Modulated 5 Sequence. I gave you a little sequence in 5 in the ARP section here, and just very, very short note lengths, very heavily modulated by rain delay here, and the rain delay deviation has an LFO on it that is random and controlled. The amount is controlled by the mod wheel, so it's not doing anything there. Kind of unique. I felt it was in the random spirit of the Aleatoric stuff. This next one is called Pitch Rising Chaos and involves 2 low trilling chaos parts, all with LFOs. I think maybe 2 different ones. Yeah. One LFO is going to the pitch of part 1, and another is going to the pitch of part 2. Slightly different rates, not very much, but these are ramp LFOs, and then you can control the overall pitch with the mod wheel. So the result is a little something like this. I think one of the most important aspects of music for film, scoring, trailers, any composition that's meant to incite a specific emotional reaction is this concept of kind of a generative motor. And I really try to bake this into a lot of my programs. There's something very interesting if you're ramping up multiple things at the same time, right? So we have this kind of steady ramp on 2 layers of pitch. Kind of resetting at a random time, but if you also work in the mod wheel, which is rising at the same time, the overall effect should be rising. And these motors, they just kind of propel you to feel suspense. They propel you to feel emotion in a accelerating way. And then having the trilling and just the aleatoric style of playing and the risers already in the parts, it's like you're just adding more sauce, more sauce, more sauce until you get this incredibly emotional sound. This one's called Pitched Cluster, and I used 1 note stretch for all of these. And I think you're probably going to go with whichever note fits the timing of your particular moment, but wanted to give you that pitched control. Very cool. Here's one called Punchy Bell Tone. Sort of similar to the FM sound that I went for earlier, maybe slightly more acoustic sounding, but the bell sound is very much the intention of this one. phaser is so effective on that really ringy, uppery stuff. Chorus and phaser are the most fun to play with when you're dealing with that register of harmonic information. Here's another synthy one. This one's called Sparkle Chime. A little bit more of a simpler sound than the last, but definitely beautiful. So it's a very different approach, definitely departing from the Aleatoric Woodwind vibe, but tried to create something that would have at least as much emotion or emotional response in the program. I did 3 trill clusters. These are kind of my Taylor hand-picked trill moments. These are the sounds that I really resonated with the most. Here's one. Here's 2. One is more high-end focused, 2 is more mid-range focused, and here is 3. A little bit more low focused. So 3 very different kinds of trills. And finally, I think I will leave you on a mysterious, tense moment. This is called Wide Cluster. Nothing too crazy, just 4 parts here from the Toy Train Graveyard. I love the name of that. It's just fantastic. And I also used all wide mic parts and then some panning on parts 3 and 4 as well. Again, a series of one-note sames. Part 4 is, I think, exclusively really high shrieky stuff, so you can bring that in with the mod wheel. To really get that upper harmonic bite. So definitely a crescendoing part, definitely meant to make you feel uneasy. It's a really, really cool library, right? From an individualism standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, from a full spectrum standpoint, Aleatoric Woodwinds is, for me, the most comprehensive orchestral effects library I think I've ever played. There's just so much, and because you are using this in Soundpaint, you can do so much more with it. I loved talking with Troels about this because I could just see the passion and intention behind every single one of these decisions. And I think the end result is nothing short of a masterpiece. So I hope you enjoyed a relatively brief, for the amount of, I know time-wise not so brief, but in terms of the depth of what is here, brief look at this amazing, amazing library, and I do hope you pick it up and add it to your Soundpaint family. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. This is Chimy, signing out. Take care.